I really enjoyed my time with developer Beenox's first Amazing Spider-Man game, as I thought it was an entertaining yet slightly flawed movie license game that was better than it had any right to be. Now with the release of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 into theaters, Beenox gets another chance to improve on their Spidey formula and give us the best game the web slinger has seen. Does The Amazing Spider-Man 2 video game deliver on this? Let's find out.
Quiet! Let me see your hands.
See?
Huh. It's your lucky night. You're not the guy I'm after. Unless you had a tattoo removed.
No, man, no. I'm afraid of needles. And heights. So how about let me down, huh?
Relax, you're fine.
What?
Until the webbing dissolves. But, you know, the cops will find you by then.
The Amazing Spider-Man 2 has its own story separate from the movie of the same name's plot that follows Peter Parker / Spider-Man still on the search for the convenience store thief that murdered his late Uncle Ben. His investigation ends up leading him to the person known as the Carnage Killer, and from then on things only get more and more complicated as Spider-Man has run-ins with various characters from its extensive rogues gallery, such as Shocker, Kraven the Hunter, Electro, and the Green Goblin and the Shady Kingpin. The Amazing Spider-Man 2's story feels extremely disjointed and loosely put together. The game tries very hard to have a structured story for the first 5 missions, but after that it seems that in the rush of getting the game to release they manipulated the plot to shoehorn in the characters from the movie in any way they could. This in turn makes the game feel a lot like a loose set of coincidental events rather than a cohesive narrative, making the player not care about anything that's happening. A storyline needs a structure and a sense of where it wants to take you, and with The Amazing Spider-Man 2, a lot of what is presented just feels like filler in a game that is literally only 4 to 6 hours long. There are a lot of plot points that don't even need to be in the game at all. For instance, the prologue in the beginning has Peter flashback to the night his uncle was shot. This is obviously a blatant tutorial level and a refresher on how Uncle Ben was murdered, but its inclusion is made utterly pointless when in the next cutscene Peter explains all of what we just played through, but again in detail. It's just nonsense padding in a game where everything feels like padding. And for some reason Peter loves to talk to himself a lot, when in and out of the suit, as when he's alone, he likes to say exactly what he's thinking as to insultingly remind the player to what just happened in the story, or to remind the player of what his objective is. This makes no sense from a character standpoint. I get that it makes sense from a game design standpoint, but it just makes Peter look insane. Furthermore, Spidey takes a page out of Deadpool's book and proceeds to break the fourth wall in moments for some reason. That is literally never explained. I'm not kidding, he looks directly at the camera and talks to the player. It's so strange and out of character that it made me actually wonder if Beenox had forgotten whom Spider-Man is.
Fisk becomes the Kingpin by eliminating all his rivals with his anti-crime task force, and the public thanks him for it. He writes a few big checks and everyone looks the other way. But it's not just the task force. I've been taking his enemies down too, and the one who's been pointing me toward them.
The storyline's overarching theme is why Spider-Man doesn't kill wrongdoers, and that's fine, and could be interesting if handled correctly, but it's completely botched here. You could be really engaged and intrigued by the main plot up to a certain point, and then randomly have Electro or the Green Goblin show up out of nowhere for no coherent reason, and it just takes you out of the experience as a whole. The only reason these characters are even in the game is because they're in the movie and they need to be on the back of the box. It's extremely sad because I know Beenox are capable of delivering interesting Spider-Man stories, as evident in Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions and even the first Amazing Spider-Man game. And you can see that they were trying to do the same here, but any attempt at that is dashed and thwarted by the game's license interfering with things. Overall, The Amazing Spider-Man 2's story is extremely disappointing and fails to tell a coherent and interesting story, but sadly, not through lack of trying.
Allow me to introduce you to the Enhanced Crime Task Force. Now, the police are doing a fine job with limited resources. But when they face threats outside their normal scope, they need more, and we have provided.
In terms of graphical prowess, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 looks identical to the first game. When the first Amazing Spider-Man was released, it was on old hardware and I thought it was a decent looking game when considering the amount of time that was given to the developer to create it and for the generation it was released on. But now, however, these visuals just cannot be defended. I recorded all my footage for this review with a PS4 copy of the game. Does this look like a game that belongs on the new generation of consoles to you? Obviously not. The open world of Manhattan looks like it belongs in an early Xbox 360 game, with such things as muddy textures, various amounts of pop-in, and frame rate issues. On top of all that, the world just feels completely lifeless, with cars that move with the same AI patterns, indistinguishable locales, and citizens that couldn't care less about what's happening around them. This is just unjustifiable when I'm playing this game on the same console I've played both Infamous Second Son and Assassin's Creed 4 on, games that both boast open worlds that feel real, lived in, and are presented with meticulous amounts of detail. The character models in the game range in quality from decent looking to horribly creepy and disgusting looking. For example, Spider-Man and Kraven's characters don't look too bad, but Kingpin and the Green Goblin are scary to look at as they lack style and a lot of detail. All the enemies in the game have minimal differences in their character models, especially the thugs that look like they were ripped straight out of the 90s with their snapback hats and bandanas across their faces. Facial animations are practically non-existent, as no work has gone into making sure characters' mouths sync up with what they're actually saying. Each time someone speaks, it looks like they're having a hand up their ass with a puppeteer manipulating them. The animations, however, are average, if not a tiny bit clunky. Spider-Man's awesome yet limited skill set is shown off with awesome and fluid animations, and each villain's attack look in tune with the character's abilities and gives a sense of power to them. Generally, the animations are okay, but as a whole, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 has some of the worst graphic design I'm yet to see on the PlayStation 4, and I haven't even mentioned the huge amount of clipping and visual glitches that the game boasts.
My name is Sergei Kravenov. Men call me Kraven the Hunter.
So you left me that note. Huh. Judging from the web, you're one of those crazy reality show guys who runs around naked in the woods eating bugs. How can you help me?
I can make you a true hunter, not just a boy pretending to be a man.
The voice acting in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 ranges from average to extremely poor. The best voice in the game is Sam Riegel as Spider-Man, but even he isn't very memorable. The entire voice cast just sounds like they were told what their character was like and implemented the least amount of emotion into them. If a character is bad in the game, they snarl, and if someone is a big guy like Kingpin, they breathe heavily. You don't get the feeling that these people are real, with real motivations and feelings. They all just sound completely disinterested in their roles. Also, Stan Lee is in the game as an alternate version of himself who owns and works at a comic book store. Yes, obviously it's nice they put Stan in the game as a thank you for creating the character, but not only does Stan being there take you out of the experience, it also reminds you that Stan Lee is not an actor. Guys, there's a reason why Stan only does cameos in his movies. He's not an actor, and even more so, he cannot voice act to save his life. Stan, buddy, just stick to the cameos. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 soundtrack is pretty forgettable. The main theme by Samuel LaFlamme is the only redeeming factor, as it embodies everything that Spider-Man should be. It inspires the wonder, excitement and epicness that it rightfully should. The only problem is that nothing else in the game even comes close to it. It seems like all the production work went into the main theme, since it was going to be the song that played in the menus, whereas everything else took a backseat and was made at the last minute. Not one villain has a cool villain theme, which is especially disappointing since this is something the superhero genre usually does well in respects to its movies and video games. To make this matter even worse, the game has a number of audio glitches, including points where you'll be swinging around the city to have the backing track play over itself or unevenly transition to the next track, points where you'll be watching a cutscene and voiceover will just cut out mid-sentence, and worst of all, you'll have points where characters will move their mouths but none of the audio will play, leaving you confused and unable to deliberate what even just happened. The sound effects are decent, with punches sounding like they should, and the web slinging sounds as invigorating as it looks. The only problem is that these sounds never change, and you get tired of hearing them after playing for more than 20 minutes. Seriously, you'll be hearing the same sounds throughout the entire experience. Eventually, the sound effects will begin to annoy you, just as it did me. Overall, the sound design in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is average, but the various audio glitches and poor voice acting really does bring it down.
Something familiar about you. Max Dillon?
You don't even remember. You said I was your eyes and ears.
I remember now. I did say that, and I meant it.
Liar! You abandoned me! Left me in that place. Let them hurt me.
In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, you'll be doing quite a few things as Spidey, but most prominent of which is obviously the web slinging. In the first Amazing Spider-Man game, web slinging was just a means to get around. It didn't require any thought or skill, you just held the button and it would take you where you wanted to go. Simple and easy. In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Beanox has stated that webs will now only stick to buildings, and in order to get around successfully, you must calculate the next move precisely. What they have stated is complete and utter bullshit. The web sling is extremely inconsistent with the rules it sets out for the player. When you first start the game, you are told that your webs only stick to buildings, but then as you play, you see that if you go to Central Park where there are no buildings, Spidey's web will stick to anything. and what seemingly seems to be the sky. This inconsistency is everywhere, as when you enter side missions, webs don't stick to the buildings at all, and the game just forgets about the rule completely. If you're gonna have to give the player a rule, don't break the exact rule to make the game easier, Beanox. Not only does that make the web slinging annoying to take part in, it also confuses the player to what they can and can't do, in turn making your rules pointless. It's not like the inconsistency matters anyway, because there is no momentum to the web slinging. I don't feel like Spider-Man is flying past traffic at breakneck speeds, or that he's roaring at unbelievable heights. It's actually a lot slower to web sling properly anyway. It's much easier just to tap the web button and make Spidey constantly pull himself forward inch by inch. Funnily enough, even if you manage to have a little fun with just swinging around Manhattan, the Amazing Spider-Man 2 will go out of its way to make sure that you do not enjoy yourself. The game has a morality system of sorts that gives you a good public image when you take part in side missions and solve crimes, and gives you a bad public image if you skip them. If you do skip them, your image will become bad, and Oscorp will send a variety of things to kill you in the open world depending on which level of bad you're on. This is all well and good on paper, but how it's executed in the game makes absolutely no sense. For instance, you'll spend a good 30 minutes doing side missions just to get the good public rating, but then the game will instantly remove other side missions from the map, drastically lowering your image into the red again. There's literally no time given between getting good karma and then being given bad karma. Literally, in order to be a good guy throughout the entire game, Spider-Man would have to be in all places at once. What's even worse is that the game will sometimes just give you a bad rating after completing a main mission. This whole stupidly underdeveloped system makes traversing the open world turn from being an exhilarating time to an annoying chore. The web rush is back and is essentially the same as in the original Spider-Man game. You hold down R1 and the game will show you all the positions Spider-Man can get to in his vicinity, and once you select one, Spidey will go into autopilot and get there for you. When I reviewed the first title, I said that the web rush is a cool idea, but it wasn't fully realised and needed to be improved upon, as it makes the game too easy. For instance, maybe add an energy bar for it so it can't be spammed to make the game easier or something. But nope, it's essentially the same and it still makes the game too easy, which is unbelievably disconcerting to me. The combat in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is still the Batman Arkham ripoff that it is in its predecessor, with little added to spice it up. You mash the attack button to hit your foes, and then use the counter button when your spider sense flashes, as you build up a number of hits that are displayed on a number on the side of the screen. But none of this is visceral at all. There aren't any combos, there isn't very much variety in the attack animations, and I swear there is only 2 finishers for each character in the game. And by the way, the hit counter on the left side of the screen serves nothing, and is utterly pointless. Speaking of pointless, there's an arbitrary upgrade system that offers up a measly amount of upgrades that are usually extremely pointless and don't benefit you at all. There is also a stealth aspect to the game, but just like the first, it really isn't anything to talk about in its regard. You can crawl around on ceilings and walls and rappel down to silently take out enemies, or you can just sneak up behind them and do the same. It's literally the base idea of stealth, and since it's so bare bones, it doesn't encourage different playstyles that the game clearly wants it to. The villain boss fights in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 range from pretty fun to formulaic slogs. Most of the boss fights consist of hitting them a few times, countering or jumping out of the way, and then hitting them some more. The only boss fights that differ from this are actually entertaining are the Shocker, Electro, and Green Goblin boss encounters. Overall, however, I would say that the first game had better boss fights than The Amazing Spider-Man 2 has, which was actually 2 years ago.
Harry, people with lives, with families and friends who love them. Just because you didn't have that doesn't give you the right to take it from anyone else.
No one gave a damn about me! And I care about them!
A big aspect that was advertised in the Amazing Spider-Man 2 game's marketing campaign was the fact that you get to play as Peter Parker in certain missions for the first time ever. After playing this game, I can now understand the reason why this has never been done before. It's because playing as Peter Parker is extremely fucking dull. In each of these missions, you as Peter will slowly move around a location and talk to people or take pictures. That is literally it. These moments are so fucking pointless and could have been cutscenes, but yet again, this is just another thing that's added to pad out the playtime of the game. Whenever you talk to someone, there is also this conversation tree that looks like it's been pulled straight out of an RPG, giving you the hint that maybe every one of these conversation options will give you a different response and will change the storyline throughout the course of the game. But nope, this is all just aesthetics. This system is literally just a way of deliberating what piece of information you will get next. How fucking meaningless and disheartening is that?
You must have some way of reaching him.
Well,
Peter, I need Spider-Man's blood.
I'll take that. Huh. A little early for Halloween, isn't it?
The side missions in the game are largely the same as the first, as you still have fistfights, car chases and people to save from rubble, but now they have added side missions where you have to save civilians from burning buildings and find and discard bombs. All these missions get boring seriously quickly as they're all the same thing in every mission, and none of them require any skill whatsoever. The only missions I thought were entertaining were the burning building missions, because at least in those you had to find the civilians and save them whilst under a timer, which gave the situation a sense of urgency and the player, dare I say it, a tiny bit of adrenaline. The worst part is not only that the missions themselves get boring after the second time you do them, but they also play this annoying repetitive news broadcast after every single time you succeed, in turn making you not want to play them at all. Other than that, you can visit Aunt May at her home to change into unlocked suits or replay missions, and you can visit Stan Lee's comic stand to check out the various comics you've collected around the city or play some challenge type maps at the arcade. All this stuff is obviously in service of fanfare, but the sentiment inevitably becomes fruitless, as I don't think fans of Spider-Man would ever go near this mess of a game.
You know, I hear jail's a lot nicer now. The toilets have seats and everything.
Hey, die. Come, Spider-Man. Let's see what you can do.
The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was a game that I was actually looking forward to when it was announced alongside the new movie, since I thoroughly enjoyed the first game developed by the same developers. I thought the only way Beenox could go is up in terms of quality of their Spider-Man games, since this is in fact their first Spider-Man outing to date. But sadly I was wrong. It's extremely sad to say that I think Beenox is clearly getting progressively worse at making Spider-Man games, as the quality has been falling ever since 2010 saw the release of Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, with The Amazing Spider-Man 2 being the worst to date. The story is convoluted and incoherent, the graphics are beyond awful for the generation in which it resides, and the gameplay is hugely padded and derivative of better, more complete games, and for that I give The Amazing Spider-Man 2 a 4 out of 10. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a largely functional game, but its lack of ambition, lazy game design, muddled plot, and amount of visual and audible glitches bring it down to a below average score. I sincerely hope that Beenox can return to form and create some truly amazing Spider-Man experiences, but for now, stay away from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, as all it will do is disappoint you.
Whatever happened to you, it's affected your mind. But there are people who can help. Places you can go.